Good day, folks, and welcome to Quarry Side Chat, where we interview Freemasons and discuss topics about the past, present, and future of Freemasonry in the 21st century. As a reminder, the thoughts and ideas expressed here are the sole opinions of the participants and don't represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Kindly keep your conversation open to the public and on the level. Today, we have Right Watchful Brother Christopher Earnshaw again with us for a question and answers on the spiritual alchemy and its relation to Freemasonry. He has written many books, which we have done in our earlier sessions, which you can actually go back to and look at them. One was on China and its connections with Freemasonry. And today we'll be dealing with alchemy. Christopher, thank you for joining us today. Would you please start, and we will start asking you some questions regarding this amazing topic.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take today's conversation about spiritual alchemy based on the book of the same name. Yep, something like that. And I have a dozen or so questions, and I just want to go back over the how I came to think about Freemasonry in terms of alchemy. One of the things that I noticed, there were some small anomalies in the ritual, and they kind of irked me because, well, one of the reasons is because I had what is known as a classical education. Nowadays, it's quite rare to have a classical education because governments want their citizens to be educated in technology and science. So the humanities is really being pushed to the back. And so a classical education means that you normally learn either Latin or Greek. I studied Latin from the age of 6 to about 12, I think. I didn't do much Greek, but I picked up some Greek because it's part of that educational process. So when I look at the rituals from that perspective of a classical education, and of course, at the time Freemasonry was revived in the 1770s and onwards, everybody had classical educations. It actually explains it in the ritual. The several liberal arts and sciences. That is what a classical education was. And so nowadays, people who don't have that insight, I think they miss some of the nuances in the ritual that were kind of obvious to me. And one was to do, let's see if I can get the quotation here. So in the ritual, it says our ancient brother Pythagoras, who traveled in many countries and discovered the Euclid's theorem, and on his discovering it, he shouted out Eureka. Well, we know that's incorrect. It wasn't Pythagoras that shouted Eureka. It was Archimedes, and for a totally different reason. Archimedes was asked by the king of the country he was in to see if he could find a way of measuring how much gold was in a crown. Well, one of the challenges with that is because it's an irregular object, so it's not so easy to measure. What the background is that the king had given a goldsmith a certain amount of gold to make this crown. And the king believed that the goldsmith had substituted some of the gold and he'd mixed in a base metal or not so valuable metal, perhaps silver or something else. And he wanted Archimedes to prove it. And Archimedes, the story goes that Archimedes, when he got into his bath, the water overflowed, and then it suddenly occurred to him he could do the same thing with the crown, put it in certain amount of water, and he came up with the idea of displacement. And it's also that whole concept is used by ships to see how much ballast is needed, because then you can work out displacement of ships, and then you can work out the ballast. So it was a really important discovery, but it has nothing to do with Pythagoras. So, I thought, well, that's kind of strange. In those days, why would they write something like that, knowing it to be, they would have all known it to be wrong. However, I think that they put in kind of hints into the ritual, like Eureka, and the hints were for brethren to look further into and around the ritual to see if there was something else they could learn from it. And I started digging in and looking for things, and suddenly all sorts of doors kind of opened up to me, and that led me to understand the second degree as a degree based on alchemy. And alchemy, of course, there are several types of alchemy. When we think of alchemy nowadays, we think of trying to make lead into gold. Well, it's nearly impossible. I would take out nearly. It is impossible to make gold out of lead using the technology they had at that time. We now know, using modern physics, that actually it is possible to change lead into gold. However, it takes a lot of energy, and the end result doesn't pay for itself. So using all the energy to transmute lead into gold is so expensive, it would be cheaper to buy the gold in the first place. So though the theory though the idea in theory is correct, practically it is useless. So then I started looking further into the ritual, and when I looked at the history of alchemy and compared it to Freemasonry, I realized that there was a disconnect, because alchemy was no longer popular at that time. I think probably the start of the Royal Society in 1660 was the death blow to alchemy, because it started people thinking in scientific ways, based on the writing of Sir Francis Bacon, who proposed a scientific method of education. That means testing, recording, and doing the same test several times by several people to see if you get the same result. In those days, that type of scientific inquiry, or yes, I suppose discovery, was basically done by the alchemists. They did experiments, and they recorded the experiments, and then they kept trying to see if they could make gold or something else. And this is how alchemy became science, because that recording their experiments was part of this Francis Bacon's idea of the new science, he called it. And so when the Royal Society came along, they started to distinguish between different types of sciences, such as, let's see, geometry and mathematics and geology and physics and chemistry. And these they were divided. And soon after the Royal Society was set up, probably 10, 15 years afterwards, then groups of like-minded people set up institutions. So like the institution of, they call it, what do they call it now? The Royal Society of Chemists, or Chemistry. And so these societies started their organization. They kept information, and they reported it in journals to other people. The Royal Society also had its philosophical transactions. So this is basically what was happening. So why would Freemasonry, so some 20 years, no, after the Royal Society, so it's already 57 years later, why would they be interested in making a ritual based on alchemy? And what I realized is that it wasn't um, laboratory alchemy, but it was spiritual alchemy that they were talking about, but in terms of alchemy. And so that is what that book was about. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. Does anyone have any questions so far? Just no. Okay.
No questions.
Okay, I'll stream on. So, Brother Ranganathan, is that right?
Sanjay Ranganathan.
Okay.
Yeah, you can call me Sanjay.
Yeah, okay. So your first question was to do with what are the stages of spiritual alchemy? So the books I've written were originally one book, but it's like 1,000 pages, and publishers I spoke to said it wouldn't work as a large book like that on the cost of publishing and other things. It means the price would be too high, not attractive to people to buy. So I had to divide the book into 4. And so your question covers these 2 books, the Spiritual Alchemy, of course, too much light, and then the last book, the Royal Arch book. So unfortunately, I couldn't get what I wanted to say in one book. And so I will quickly refer to. So when we talk about alchemy, there were 7 steps to alchemy, the actual process. And so you would have, first of all, you would take the object and then you would cook it at a very high temperature. It's what they called calcination. And it would become blackened. And the Latin word was nigredo. And then they would try and purify that, the ash that was left over, by washing or diluting it. And that was then called albedo. And then they tried to, the next step was the transmutation of the ash into something else, where the product would become yellow, and it was then called citrinus. And then they tried to bring various materials together. They'd done all this process separately. They join it together, which they called coagulation. Sorry, no, that's right. No, they were trying to transmute it in a process called citrinus, and then they bring it all together and continue to heat it again. The product would then go red. It was a stage they called rubedo. And so there were the 5 stages, but there are actually 7 different steps in this. And I'm looking through my fingers. Let's see if I can find the picture here. So I believe that the first 3 Grand Masters, who basically rewrote the original 2-degree rituals, they didn't know anything about alchemy. I don't think they did. Looking at their backgrounds, they wouldn't have known. De Sagulier, he was a Huguenot priest. He worked at the Royal Society, but he had no background in alchemy. George Payne, he was an antiquarian. He collected old documents. He worked for the Royal Mint. No, he didn't work for the Mint. He worked for the Treasury. Isaac Newton worked at the Mint. So de Sagulier worked with Isaac Newton, and so did George Payne. They both worked in the same building, which we call the Exchequer in England. So, and Sir Isaac Newton was the head of the Mint, making coins. And Paine was in the Exchequer, but in the same building, they would have known each other. Particularly in London, there were only 500,000 people in the whole of London. So you wouldn't expect a government agency to be more than 10, 20 people. So they knew each other. And I believe it's Newton that advised the first three grandmasters on how to incorporate alchemy. And what I think is that he gave them 3 textbooks that were unique to alchemy, that they could pick things from and to use them in the ritual to make it authentic. One of the things that they use, and I can't find it now, is something, a picture called conjunction. And conjunction, and I have a picture of it here somewhere, but let's have a look. Conjunction. Conjunction is interesting because it shows what a lodge may look like, and this may be difficult to show you. There's a picture of it, conjunction. And the things that look like Masonic are, for example, the person approaching this little temple is blindfolded and he's trying to find his way up. The 7 steps are the 7 steps of alchemy. And around here are virtues, 6 virtues. And this is the zodiac around here. And the zodiac has been changed so that there are 12 houses in the zodiac, going from Gemini, Aries, etc. But they have been squeezed into this arc of 270 degrees. Behind it is nothing, it's just black. This could be the idea of darkness in the north. Inside, we see the star and sun and star on top of the little palace. It's like a palace room. There's a king inside there. And on top we have the phoenix. And on top of that we have Mercury. All of these are to do with alchemy, of course. So this picture may have been a kind of idea of the 3, 5, 7 steps of Freemasonry might have come from here, I believe. So this is the physical alchemy, but the spiritual alchemy is different, and that is in the Royal Arch book. I'm only giving the titles. It's only for people who have the book to give them an idea where to look for the answers. So it's on page 215 of this book, and it refers to the question you asked. It's actually a little bit later, to do with the what number is it? I think it's 10. Some of these questions, the answers overlap, so it's not quite as easy as it looks. Yes. So to do with Psalm 133, behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. That is a what I call an alchemical psalm, because so in alchemy you have the 3 prima materia, and this is coming from Paracelsus, who decided, I don't know how he decided, but he said that the 3 original materials were mercury, sulfur, and magnesium. However, magnesium is very unstable chemical and explodes very easily when it's exposed to air. So with sulfur and magnesium together, you could create explosions, and that is what did happen. I have a copy of a book here by an alchemist called Rofo Magus, who actually blew up his house with exactly this sort of experiment. So after Paracelsus' 3 prima materia, they changed it to make magnesium became salt. And they believed that everything had salt in it. So like seawater has salt in it, of course, but if you burnt a tree, in the ashes there would be salt. That was their idea. So salt is in everything. And so then it was appropriate to alchemy. And by the way, they called alchemy the royal art, which I believe this is actually a pun on royal art. And then royal arch is taken from that. So I feel that there's some sort of connection there. When you read the ritual, that it says, you know, the by the use of our art. Well, Freemasons don't really have an art, it's a ritual. So by the use of our art is a kind of key word, a hint for by the use of royal art, or therefore alchemy. So in the Psalm of 133, so I'm taking your questions out of order, it refers to, and it's section 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Okay, no, it's, let's see if I can get it. What number was that? Is it 8 or 9? 9, okay. So one of the problems that the alchemists had is whatever they did, they were not able to transmute lead into gold. And they felt that there was some spiritual key chemical that was missing. And after trying lots of things, and there was a list of, one German alchemist made a list of 100 possible quintessential chemicals that would be the catalyst that was able to change lead into gold. But after many years, they came to the conclusion that it was dew, the dew that comes out of the air early in the morning when there's a difference in temperature from very cold and it starts to warm up. Flowers and grass is covered in dew. They felt that this dew was coming from the moon, and it descended from the moon, rather like rain coming out of the sky. Dew came from the moon, so it had to be special. And they felt that this dew not only was unique, but it had a unique kind of spiritual message inside the water. So they used to collect it early in the morning by spreading sheets on the wet grass and collecting it in the sheets and then wringing it out and then using this dew water to for their experiments. Well, one of the problems is with European alchemy is that it came originally from the Middle East. And so the word alchemy comes from alchemia, which is Egyptian, meaning the black land of the Nile. The Nile is very fertile. It floods every year and it brings down silt from the mountains down towards the Mediterranean. And then the waters recede and it leaves all that rich silt, probably 200 or 300 meters either side of the Nile. So this is how, because Egypt is basically a desert, but along the Nile is very rich. And that black silt that came down is where we get the word from alchemy. So the Egyptians were also were practicing alchemy and metallurgy and many other things. But in reality, alchemy came from China, and the Chinese were the first to experiment, and they also used 3 primary materials, and one of them was mercury. The thing about mercury is that it's a very fascinating metal because it's liquid. It's the only liquid metal that we have. It comes out of red rock called cinnabar, and this cinnabar is crushed and heated, and then the mercury is see, from out of the red you get mercury. It sounds very alchemical, red, the color fire, red. So this liquid metal, it just seems like a miraculous product to them. and they tried various combinations, but the Chinese eventually settled on 3 primary metals, and that idea, and of course they had been looking from 500 BC. They had been looking for studying alchemy, and this idea 500 BC came into Egypt. I don't know exactly when, but it came into Europe in the 1400s, 13 or 1400s, probably with the Arabs taking over Spain. When the Moorish Arabs took over Spain, they were studying alchemy, and that way it came from Spain into France and Germany and Europe. So the Europeans were quite late to learn about alchemy. So the Chinese were looking for something else. They weren't trying to make gold. One of the reasons is that Chinese economy was actually based on silver, which is unusual. So was the Japanese, for that matter. They traded silver, and they made these big, like curved, they look like bread baskets shape. It's about, all sorts of sizes, but they were standard units and they were silver. And so the Chinese were not looking to make gold. What they were looking to is to make the elixir of immortality. And so they thought, because this mercury was such a unique product, that it must be part of that. One of the things about mercury, besides being liquid, it doesn't tarnish. It doesn't go bad, so to speak. Silver tarnishes. All the metals tarnish. Iron rusts. But gold doesn't, and that's one of its unique properties. That's why so many people, not just because it's in supply is very limited, but the fact that it doesn't tarnish makes it a unique gold. And so the Chinese they weren't just looking for the elixir of immortality. It was a mandate from the first emperor called Qing Huangdi, Qing Shi Huangdi, sorry, meaning the Qing emperor, first Qing emperor. He wanted to live forever, and even though cinnabar is actually also quite a limited resource, but he made up an academy of Chinese alchemists, and he sent them all over China looking for this elixir of immortality so that he could live forever. And this idea, immortality, which is in my 3rd book, Quest for Immortality. So yes, so it wasn't just the first, all the other emperors also got this got hooked into the idea of immortality. And I don't have the number with me. I probably could look it up, but let's see if I can find it here. 2 kingdoms, double association, alchemy by 2 degrees, alchemy, history of alchemy. Secrets. No. It's really important text. Works of God. Death of early alchemists. History of alchemy. So I think something like a dozen Chinese emperors died from mercury poisoning, because they all thought that this was had to be part of the equation. Don't have it here. No, sorry, can't find it. But yeah, so what we got now is that the Chinese realized before 100 BC, they already knew that mercury was poisonous, and B, what we call laboratory type alchemy was impossible. So then they changed to see if they couldn't achieve immortality by looking for a spiritual alchemy. something how they could transform themselves to live forever. And that's what this book's all about, really. It starts in this book and is completed in the Royal Arch book. So here we go. So what I was going to show you, so the process of spiritual alchemy also relies on Dew, and that is, I think it's not a coincidence. So the Chinese said that your saliva will be moved around internally in your body with, sorry, not the other way. So you have this energy. I think in India you call it prana. The Chinese call it qi, and like qigong or qigong, and you can move it around your body and heat it up and move it around and compress it, and mainly just by using your mind to do it. And after a while, your saliva will start to taste like honey, sweet as honey, and they called this the sweet dew. And this is why the Europeans were also looking for dew, but they misunderstood it. And what it is, again, I can put the picture up here. So it's based on this concept here of being in a quiet position, legs folded, whatever. And at the bottom, there is a cauldron. That's a Chinese cauldron. And you circulate, this circle goes up the back to the head, comes down the front and back to the cauldron. In the middle is the heart. And so, and at the top is called the south gate, and the bottom is the north gate. Now, the Chinese said, you should not let this energy escape from your anus, which is this one here, because then all your exercise is wasted. So you have to make sure that this cycles round, and we're talking about 150 cycles in the morning, and again 150 in the evening, and perhaps doing this for two or 3 years. And then your saliva tastes sweet, and you're then able to create what they call is the to make a seed, an immortal seed that goes around, and eventually from the top of your head your spirit can escape. And here's a picture from one of their textbooks, and you can see the spirit on top of a little cloud above his head. There's a little person there. I don't know if you can see that. Yes, this is what they were trying to achieve. And so, well, then you would say, well, why bother? You know, what's it all about? And so they felt that if you were able to achieve that, you would be able to get immortality. Now, it all depends what you mean by immortality. We all know that nobody lives forever, but what they started to think, well, there are two ways. One way is if you can extend your life is one thing, but you won't live forever. However, if you were aware that you are a spiritual being and you were able to leave your body as a spirit, after a time, you leave so many times, your spirit becomes strengthened and it can exist in the world by itself. And that to them was immortality. And so, so question one, what are the 7 stages of spiritual alchemy? There aren't 7 stages per se. That is, the 7 comes from alchemy, what we call puffers. They're puffers because they used furnaces with very high temperatures. For example, I think iron, or is it lead? One of them melts at something like 2,500 degrees Celsius. That's really difficult to achieve in those days. So they used bellows, and when they were using bellows, they were puffing air forcing air into the the kilns to make them hotter, and therefore they became known as puffers. So the puffers had 7 stages of alchemy, 7, but the spiritual alchemists, who were probably Taoists, adherents of Taoism, they didn't have 7 stages as such. However, in the main textbook for spiritual alchemy, which is called The Secret of the Golden Flower, and I think I have it in front of me here. I think it's just here. It's holding up the computer, which is not so clever, is it? Anyway, yeah, here it is. I have to move my computer a second. Let's try not to drop it. Oops. That is The Secret of the Golden Flower, and with a commentary by Carl Jung. Okay, let's pop it back up again. Sorry about this. Yes, okay, let's hope it doesn't all fall down. Okay. So in that text, they say it's a 15-step process. But when you read the book, you realize they're talking about really small things and things that from our Western way of looking at it, not really 15 steps, probably three steps. First of all is moving the prana, the key energy around the body, and that's done by breathing. So in this picture here, you will see that there are circles, 4 little circles on the process. You start breathing in the cauldron at the bottom, and you bring the energy and the breath up your back to the top of your head, and then it comes down the front and then back down to a position underneath your navel someplace. So there are 4 of these gates, they call them, and the top one's the south gate, the north gate, east is in the front and west is at the back. The east and west, they purify the energy as it goes up and down, and so it gets purer and purer and purer. You're doing this 300 times a day for 20 years. The energy gets really, it gets really refined is the word, I think. And then you are able to, at a certain time, things start happening in your mind. For example, you will start seeing light in front of your eyes. You'll have hallucinations of flowers falling out of the sky and things like this, which shows you are ready to exit from the top of your head. Now, one thing that has confused not just me, but the first 3 Grand Masters, is that the top of the head is the south, and you're sitting on the north exit. It seems reverse to the way we would think, being in the north of the northern hemisphere, because London's in the north. Everybody would expect north to be at the top. I mean, if you're in Australia or the Antipodes, perhaps you think differently, but basing Freemasonry in London, you would expect this to be the north. But the reason, I think, is because the Chinese, the way they drew their maps and their compass was all in reverse. They saw themselves as being north, and over there is south. And so there's a Chinese exercise, a discipline called feng shui, and it's about how to put furniture in a house and which way the house should face, and many other things, so that the energy, good energy, comes into the house and negative energy doesn't come into the house. And the compass they use, 8-sided compass, again has the south at the top of the compass. So for this reason, I think they thought of the head as being the south. So in the 3rd degree, I can't talk about the 3rd degree, can I? This talk's open to entered apprentices, yes? Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I won't talk about the third degree, but the third degree, basically, there are 4 gates in Solomon's temple, and Hiram cannot escape by the north gate. For exactly this region, the energy that is being passed round, he has to escape by the south gate. But in Freemasonry, he actually escapes by the north exit, which there shouldn't have been a gate there. I believe this is how it's combined in this practice of circulating the energy through the body. Anyway, let's move on. So question 2, that's a very long question 1, but question 2, if alchemy is
Yeah, we would be happy if you could restrict your responses to less than 5-6 minutes.
for each one. Okay.
For
yes.
each one. Yep.
So if alchemy is transforming base metal to something precious, what does spiritual alchemy transform? And that I think I've covered that. So it's a transformation of yourself, being able to make your spirit to leave your body. That doesn't mean to say you are dead. You are alive. Your body is able to transmit its consciousness outside the body. And so the Chinese felt that, why would you do that? I mean, it's possible, but why? For 2 reasons. First, it proves that you are immortal. You are able to leave your body, turn around and look at your body sleeping on the bed. That you don't need any more proof. You are immortal. Secondly, you're able to do good things for other people. For example, helping in healing. So when your consciousness or spirit leaves the body, nobody can see it. It's a spirit. Yes, it's like a ghost. But you are able to receive information because it's your consciousness that's outside your body. So your what I call an astral body is able to see, hear. You cannot smell, you cannot touch, but you can see and hear. You cannot talk, but just seeing and hearing, you're able to collect information that helps people, help people become healthy, or people have trouble in their life. You're able to help. So for the Chinese, that was sufficient. And nowadays, many people write about astral travel. I have probably 20 books on it on my shelf here, and it's a really fascinating subject. So, does that answer your question, number 2? Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
it
thank you.
does. In fact, you spoke about the spirit leaving the body, and it's a conscious effort of letting your spirit go out and then coming back into your body. We have found several instances of similar happenings in Hinduistic philosophy, as well as in the religion of the Hinduism as such. These people are called siddhars, in the sense that but there is a view that there are some people who are alive for more than 3,000 to 4,000 years. They have a out of body experience where they have shunned their body and they still live as a spirit in this world. Only thing is, it is not what you call they kind of have reached a particular level in which they are able to disguise or hide themselves from the naked eye. So openly you are not able to see them, but yes, there is there are people who have been categorized as so, and it is expected that they live in some of the olden temples and they keep sending their blessings to the general populace.
Yes.
Even Avatar Babaji.
In fact,
Babaji is one of those
in
people.
fact, exactly. In fact, if I have to explain it to you, or explain it in a neural way, we hardly use about 2.5 to 3% of our brain capacity. Most of average individual people use about 2.5 to 3% of our brain capacity. There is a potential to use to a higher level. if we expand our capacity of the brain to start using it in higher percentages and start using more of consciousness to deal with things rather than using the subconscious aspect of our life to handle situations. When we start doing that, we start seeing things in a different light, and we can hide ourselves from view. The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells is more about that. It, of course, it talks about a particular trigger event that happens. So the basic thing is that you can hide yourself from rest of the world, and you can do things which you want. And a normal question is that if somebody were to hide himself in that manner, will he not do something destructive? But if you had destructive thoughts, you would never have reached that particular level itself. That
Yeah.
level happens only when you have positive thoughts in mind. That is why if you look at saints or people who have enormous supernatural powers, they would rather spend more time towards thinking about the welfare of the world rather than trying to come on TV or show their skills and make money for themselves.
Right.
Also, that
Wanted
if
to
you
add
look
that.
at in Freemasonry, Sanjay, the idea of the beehive, the hive of humanity, and Freemasonry being a hive, of interconnectedness, where we are all one and all interconnected. So I see a lot of connectivity also from there, and the spiritual alchemical stage to join into that, to become one with everyone.
Hmm. Yes. So in Chinese, they have a 5-step progression, and the first step is called the perfect man. And this is a theme in Freemasonry as well, that by understanding the Freemasonry and also the lesson of the perfect ashlar, we can use our experiences with the support of God to become a perfected man, to perfect ourselves. This is the first step of Chinese spiritual alchemy, is the perfect man. And then they have let's see, it's in here. No. So let's see. Yeah, so the first step is the perfected man. This second man they call the immortal. The third man is the saintly man. The fourth one is the sage. And the fifth one is the one you referred to, is they call it the Sien, spelled H-S-I-E-N. In English, we sometimes also call that a sage, but it's a person's spirit who can live on earth separate from the body of the individual. And I think, as you said, the Vedas in India also have the same stories. So this is...
Actually, you are very correct but when you look at it, we don't quite know whether, according to history, we do know that essentially alchemy has got a very strong, deep rootedness to the 3rd and 4th century through the Vedas. Because they look at the aspect of gold and long life in those areas. So there is definitely a connective switchover between China and India, and maybe historically who came up with it. But I do personally believe that based on the Vedas and the old scriptures that are there, Hinduism has been studying the alchemical variations of this, whether it's to deal with Ayurveda and medicine, or to deal with the spiritual growth of enlightenment. Somewhere over there, there is a huge connection, true, according to me.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So alchemists alchemists in England, it was a very kind of lonely occupation. You couldn't have a group of alchemists because alchemy was illegal in England. The king thought that if anybody could make gold, easily make gold, then a person could easily raise an army and bring down the monarchy. So he didn't want people in forming gold making associations. So it was illegal. So most of the alchemists worked in cabals, in little groups of 2 people, and hidden away. So they used code to write down their experiments in case somebody found them out and either stole the idea or used it as evidence in court. And so they changed all the words. And so your question 4 about gold being a representation of sun, yes, each of the 7 main metals was represented by something else. And so silver would have been the moon and sun was the gold. But
Brother Christopher, one question I wanted to ask you, that
yes.
there is a connectivity definitely to crystals. And as you say, the diamond, because in the Royal Ark, when we look at it, even in Kabbalah, we see that Darth holds a principle of being the prism, the crystal prism from which the rainbow starts its journey. So the rays of so the rays of light. So this perspective, like for example, I'll tell you a very quick story, is that we have babas with siddhis that are essentially in the form where they can do tapas, when they can meditate, and from their navel, right, they can suddenly, a crystal can suddenly pop out. You know, literally, they can take crystals out of their stomach, put them back in their stomach, and these forms of siddhis, they do, and they can basically, how do you say it, manipulate the atmosphere inside their own bodies.
I saw on television Sai Baba just holding his hand and dust or looked like sand was coming out of his hand, but there was nothing in his hand. So it's similar to what you're talking about.
Correct.
Yes. So one thing I in my books, I try and not get involved too much with Judaism or Hebrew teachings, because I think these are ideas that have been placed onto Freemasonry by later generations looking for a connection, because there was a long period, and I mentioned it in the first book, that the Royal Society was looking for a universal language which would connect the whole world. And one of the candidates was Hebrew and the other one was Chinese. Very strange, you know, why Chinese? But after a while, well, I think actually China was the flavor of the day in England from about 1680 to about 1800, 1810. Anything Chinese was very, very popular in not just England, but in Europe. And so that is my background to the book on the Royal Arch, is that why there is Chinese in Freemasonry.
Also,
But,
if you look at the Tao Te Ching, you will see that there is a lot of similarity between the rituals, I mean, in a moralistic perspective, and how we as brethren would perceive, because as I read it, I've read it like over 100 times, you know, it just keeps going through my head. One of the most amazing books, you know.
Yeah.
So I feel a very strong affinity, and I understand that there is a strong notion that how to correct the man's behavior, human behavior, and to become a better human being.
Yes. Yes. So with the Tao Te Ching, Taoism, I Ching, all of these seem to have crept into Freemasonry. I've listed some nearly 30 correspondence between Chinese philosophy and Freemasonry. So then you talk about one of the question 4 is representation of the sun, and spiritual alchemy would eventually lead you to the light. So the question then is, what is the light? And my understanding is different from what many people who are Freemasons think. Is there are 2 ideas. One is that it means wisdom, and the second one is it means that what is going to say the word, a form of moral teachings that protect you. And so getting the light, you receive all this morality. But I personally don't think that's correct, because the Masons wanted only moral people to join Freemasonry in the first place. They didn't want immoral people like drunks and dock workers, and then to teach them morality in Freemasonry. No, they didn't want that at all. That doesn't make sense. They only wanted moral people. They wanted people of good standing. And in fact, there was a tendency in the early days to get nobles, people who were somebody in society, like high-ranking military officers, these sort of people who had would bring respect to the organization, and they wouldn't have accepted laborers or other people. That's why the laborers joined the operative Freemasons and not the speculative Freemasons. So the idea of light can be found through this spiritual alchemy. And I refer to it in the book. It's a little bit long to explain it, but people who have traveled in the astral world, who have left their body, and I have dozens of books on it, and so it's really quite a common occurrence. But these people are able to access various levels of the universe that we're not aware of. So now there's this scientific explanation put forward by Michio Kaku and other people like him, that there are not just one universe, but there are several universes. It's called multiple universe theory. And so astral travelers are able to access these multiple universes, and they can see sometimes reflections of what's happening now, happening somewhere else, but with different outcomes. But anyway, so they can go without limit, and that's one of the words that the Japanese Zen Buddhists use, is without limits, that humans are without limits. And this is really what it means, that when we die, we don't really die, we just continue. It's just our body that dies, our soul continues. And you can go through different levels of consciousness, and you come to one where it's just a sea of light. And that light is all knowing. It is the same descriptions we use for God. It is omnipotent, omniscient, and whatever, I forget.
Omnipresent.
Yes, thank you. That's right. But it's this omniscience, and the light recognizes you as an astral being. You're in the light, but you're just one speck of light yourself, and the whole thing is a living organism of light. That is
So that's what Babas in India do. They go off and they find a place to sit and meditate, and it's called tapas, and they go and do their sadhana, and they basically try to find the light. And then they try to leave their bodies, which is the Stula Sharira, and they leave into the upper worlds, and they, as you say, what's called astro travel, where they start to move. And there are many books, as you said, that are written on this. This is a form of alchemy as well. It's the spiritual alchemy of time travel. And they can go to different places. In fact, if you look at it, Nostradamus and all the great prophesizers of the last, I think, 200-300 years, all have the same principles. They have basically somehow tapped into the Akashic records of this multi-dimensional layer, and they have received this information, and they expedite it in small bits that they have seen in their visions and try to compile it. Lovely. Could we have the last question on number 9, which was very important, and then we can wrap up the Q&A?
Okay. Oh, the clock's ticking. Okay, so yes, so this is very interesting. This is the Psalm 133. Now, there's one issue I found in looking at the rituals, is that sometimes what is appropriate to the second degree is actually in the first degree, and what was in the second degree should have been in the first degree. And this Psalm 133 is in the beginning, it's in the first degree, but it's actually talking about the alchemy of the second degree. And it's talking about, so it starts with the precious ointment upon the head that ran down the beard, even Aaron's. And that is A is the beginning. Yes, it's just like A to Z. It's Alpha Omega. It's similar to Christ or God, are referred to in the Bible as Alpha Omega. So it starts as A, and it goes down to as the dew of Hermon. So suddenly the ointment is referred to as dew, and it comes dew and Hermon. is in H, it's in between A and Z, and then it descended upon the mountains of Zion. Zion is Z. So you've got A to Z with H in the middle. It's exactly the same as this. What am I looking at? Picture 2. Here we are. Picture 1. Sorry, got all these bookmarks. It's exactly the same as this. So you have A is at the head, and it goes down through H, which by chance is heart, but I don't think the original authors knew about that. And it goes down to Z. So this is the ointment becoming the dew and going back up again and coming round and becoming the sweet dew. And so
just a quick intervention. In Kabbalah, the tree of life, we have Dat. Dat
Yes.
would be considered the heart. Would that be correct or not? Would Tiferet
Well,
be considered the heart?
the way I look at Dat is, first of all, it was uncovered in the first. So there are three triangles, 3 worlds in the tree of life. Bottom 2 triangles turn downwards with the fall of man, and it exposed this point called Dat. And many people say that Dat is like an entrance to the underworld. And secondly, it is the fount of knowledge. And another reading is where all the different Sephirot, they are joined as one at one point. So it's like a navel, it could be, that connects everything.
But
then,
you did say the body is upside down.
In the tree of life, it's not. In the tree of life,
no,
it's
but correct. The tree of life is also upside. It grows upside down. The tree of life, actually. The visualization of the tree of life is the roots are up and the tree is down. You know that, right? I mean, just generally.
Well, no, the way I see it is because the energy came from God down the tree of life to Malkut, which is in the bottom, which is mankind. So it came downwards. It's what's known as the lightning strike. It can't come upwards because God is above us. That's the kind of thinking, yes? So
no, but according to David has to cycle. So the cycle of life that we talk about goes from down to up, right? That's what we look at it.
It goes
but
down
the cycle
up,
also goes from up to down as well. So when we finish in Malkut, we have to start back at Ketha. So the so there is and it can go up and down, or it can go left to right or right to left. It can go both ways.
Well, the traditional,
it can flow downwards to upwards or upwards to downwards, like a magnet.
Yes, but the traditional is that the power of God came down through the 10 Sephirot to us at the bottom. For us to reconnect with God, we have to go back up the same path, the lightning strike. And we can only do it through meditation, and each of the Sephiroth is further divided into 4 sections, and they have the what they call a Kibboleth, I think it's called Quiboleth, Q-I-P-P. It's a kind of challenge on the threshold that we have to pass before we go on to the next one. But then it's complicated. But yes, so if we want, because mankind disobeyed God, we are separated from God. But what it really, I believe, is as a reference is this about our consciousness. We are no longer connected to God like people in the past. We're talking about, for example, Nostradamus. I don't think he left his body, but he was able to concentrate, and then his consciousness would leave and he would see things. That is being connected to God. That ability for our consciousness to join with the energy in I talk about the practice of the Trinity. The 3 bodies is very similar to the Chinese cycling the energy in the body. But so you raise your energy from your lower Tandien into your head, into your heart, into your head, and connect to God that way. And so what it's trying to say is
also it could be that the journey upwards, when you enter Dat is sort of a cycle in the tree that you have to escape from. That's why Gimel, which we call the journey, the dark journey from the darkness into the light, that journey is repetitive. That is the cycle of life. So the cycle of life is sort of between that repeating until you get out of that cycle, then you will move to Ketha.
Okay, so
That's sort of the understanding I perceive it as, in a way. Like the Ankh in Egyptian ideology, the key, that is essentially the idea of continuing the circle into the whole until you finally get out of that and move up ahead into the next.
I have another idea about the Ankh, the Egyptian Ankh, but it's kind of different story. It's very interesting. But so what all this kind of alchemy and hermeticism and the Kabbalah, what it's all about is us first recognizing we're spiritual beings inside a physical body. We are not the body. We own a body, but we are not the body. We are the spiritual being. That's the first thing they got to learn. Second is that we have separated ourselves from God through our materialism, wanting to own things, buy things, always focusing on the outside, not focusing on the inside. As you mentioned earlier about what you would call the Indian saints who lived thousands of years. I think the Chinese did the same thing, but in the West, we had lost this. So the Jews themselves, they had lost this connection to God. And so knowing that we're spiritual and that we can connect to God and that we're immortal, I think this is what everybody is trying to teach. But the way of teaching is like the tree of life. It's not easy to understand that message. It could have been.
But also the tree of life is there in every tradition, every religion, every culture, whether it's Mayan, whether it's Egyptian, in some form of Hinduism, it's the people tree. It's in some form it's been placed there.
Christmas
so
tree.
we see. Pardon? Christmas tree.
trees.
Possibly. I'm not sure about that, but okay.
Yeah, but it's a pagan tree that that they believe that it was life-giving, and they used to decorate it as a kind of god of the woods or the forests, and that's why we have decorated trees. But so I feel that Freemasonry is just passing on this teaching, but as a play. And in those days, we had something called theatre in the round. So Shakespeare isn't like we do nowadays with a stage and seats. He'd be a stage with people sitting around in a circle round it. So it was theatre in the round. That is what Freemasonry is. Theatre in the round. Something's happening. We're all sitting around watching and learning. And what are we learning? We're learning that we're immortal.
It's like, as we said, the pantomime of the universe. It's a large play occurring that we're trying to understand and involve ourselves with, and basically self-discover ourselves. So thank you so much, Christopher. It's an amazing lecture which you've given us, and really concise the points to your book, bringing together a lot of focus into how we perceive this and what we want to see in the future as ourselves. And as Sanjay said, we needed to get a little bit deeper into this so we could dissect it and figure out where and what, this alchemy really is in Freemasonry. This is a very obscure subject when it comes to Freemasonry. Not many Freemasons actually perceive alchemy and Freemasonry together until a bit later on, once they start to understand the tenets and principles of Freemasonry, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Freemasonry is very conservative, and people are not really open to new ideas. They see it as some, operative, based on operative Freemasonry. I don't think there is a connection to operative Freemasonry. So it was speculative. It was something for the aristocracy who knew something about alchemy. I mean, even though they weren't practicing it, it was, that's what their fathers used to do. They would have known about alchemy. And so when they went to a Freemason's ritual, they would have recognized the 3, 5, 7 steps, the 3 tria prima, the 3 primary sources of alchemy, which is mercury, sulfur, and salt, and then the 5 colors that these change into: the albedo and citrinus and the calvopaudosis, and then the 7 steps that they had to go through: calcination and burning and transmuting, etc. So that was being so obvious to them, and so I think, as I said at the beginning, that they had an education that they would have quickly understood what Freemasonry is about. Whereas nowadays, we tend to think it's more about a kind of quasi-Christian fraternity for welfare and making people better people. And and Freemasons say that all the time. We're making good men better. It was good
Also,
men
there's a lot of
joined.
connectivity with gematria that you were speaking of. There's a lot of numbers involved in this that we don't really look at. There's a lot of stuff, especially with Egyptian Freemasonry, which would be very amazing to get your take, as I said, on the Ankh and stuff like that, and maybe some other future lessons, that you can give with us, because that's a very interesting subject, and it's something that I think we're all very lacking in when it comes to these definitions. So, I mean, something to look forward to maybe in your future lectures with us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
More
you.
homework.
Sanjay, would you like to ask any other last final wrap-up questions from your side?
No, nothing. It was very, very interesting. And I think paucity of time forced us to speed up Chris. I love the way he has this, what do you call it? He sets a base, he sets the background for it, and then he pushes. And the best thing is that he leaves you with that lingering thought that there is still something more probably, and we wouldn't want to burden Chris with that. I think we will have to start researching or dig deeper and start studying to learn about it. I think that's what a wonderful writer.
Brother Sanjay, Brother Christopher has done a lot of research on the degrees and the signposts, which if he would, later on want to explain to us, and another thing which is very interesting about his 21 signposts. I mean, we can't go too deep as it's a public platform, but from your perspectives and your videos, delving into those aspects, which I feel you have not gone through with enough detail in your own channel, would be an amazing stepping stone towards
See, what probably Chris can do is that whatever he would like to see, we would like to have Chris at least once a month presenting in this channel. And I know we are going to ask too much from you. We are greedy brethren, so you'll have to excuse that.
That's
so
okay.
What we can probably do is you can give us a list of topics and some brief kind of a snapshot, a kind of synopsis of about 100 words or so that we are also keen that, yes, we would like to have these kind of incidences happening through our lectures. So accordingly, what we can do is we can try to involve the other speakers also towards that, so that we can have 1 month 1 month dedicated towards this particular aspect. So that way, the viewer who is seeing this on a regular basis will have a continuity of these lectures over a period of time. This is one
connectivity also. Correct. Yeah. Very nice.
There's also another important thing, is the history of what was happening in England at the time, because this is what motivated the Grand Masters to do all this work. It wasn't just, I have a great idea, let's put something together, because it took them 8 years to write these rituals. And so why would, I say on the back of the book, why would 3 educated and busy men decide to rewrite the ritual of a stonemasons guild when they were neither stonemasons nor manual laborers? Why would they do that? I mean, it's like, going to a doctor nowadays and saying, well, down in the port, they have some quirky things they do. Could you spend 8 years and study those, please? No, the doctor wouldn't say that. So there had to be something really unique and really special that they had discovered. Otherwise, busy people in those days, they didn't receive salaries. If they didn't work, they didn't get money. They can't waste their time rewriting a stonemason's ritual.
Absolutely correct. Thank you so much. Please feel free to give us your feedback in the comments below. And a hearty thanks to all the brethren and visitors who joined us on today's episode. We hope that you found something special and informative. We look forward to interacting with you through our social media handles, where you can express your opinions opinions, views, or even post queries about Freemasonry, links are in the description below. Join us again next time for an all-new episode. Until then, please hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. And don't forget, click that bell icon. Join us at this same Masonic time, same Masonic channel at Quarryside Chat. We wish you a magical week ahead. Until we meet again, let us now part on the square. Goodbye. Thank you.